You know those picture-perfect suburban neighborhoods where every blade of grass is exactly 2 inches tall and the American flag hangs at the precise angle approved by committee? Welcome to Willow Creek Estates, where the HOA ruled with a velvet glove that somehow always ended up feeling like a chokehold. On the surface, it was all white fences, community barbecues, and for the good of the neighborhood, smiles. Underneath, it was a kingdom run by Victoria Langford. Everyone just called her Vicky. But we all knew she was the original Karen in human form. Pastel cardigans, pearl earrings, and a clipboard that never left her side. She'd fine you for a mailbox that was 1 shade too blue, for parking your own car in your own driveway on a Tuesday, or for letting your rose bushes grow a millimeter past the approved height. And she always said the same thing with that sweet, saccharine voice. It's not personal, dear. It's just the rules. I was Sarah Klein, the woman most people barely noticed. 42, divorced, no kids, kept to myself in the corner house with the gray shutters. 5 years ago, the old board had hired my little LLC, Community Guard Solutions, to build and maintain the neighborhood's digital backbone. The online portal where dues got paid automatically. Violation notices were generated. Security camera feeds were stored. Vendor contracts were managed. And every single rule was tracked in real time. I coded it, negotiated every contract, and buried safeguards so deep even the lawyers had to squint. Most residents thought it was just the app on their phone. Vicky treated it like her personal kingdom. And for a long time I let her, because the quiet ones always do, until they don't. That Monday started like any other. I was sipping coffee on my porch, watching the sprinklers hiss in perfect unison, while my laptop pinged. Admin override denied. Not an error. A deliberate flag. Someone had tried to crawl into the core backend from a tablet registered to Brandon Langford, Vicky's golden boy son who'd just been elected vice president last month. 28. Fresh MBA. Zero experience. But a title printed on heavy cardstock and a Hugo Boss jacket he wore like armor. I cracked my knuckles, opened the logs, and there it was, elevated credential requests. No authorization key. Just pure entitlement pinging my system like it owed him money. I didn't panic. I documented everything. Timestamps, IP, device ID. Then I sent the most neutral email in history. Hi, Brandon. Noticed an access attempt from your tablet on the core environment this morning. If this was accidental, just let me know and I'll clear the flag. No reply. 3 hours later, the first system heartbeat failed. Someone had tried a manual override on the weekend backup restore. Still from inside the neighborhood. Still his tablet. By afternoon, I'd quietly looped in the HOA's legal counsel. Just a polite heads up, because what Brandon didn't know, and what Vicky had conveniently forgotten, was that the entire system wasn't owned by the HOA. It was licensed to my LLC under a 5-year custodial agreement signed when the old board still had brains. They assumed I'd always stay quiet. They assumed wrong. While I was drafting my internal report, I overheard the conversation that sealed it. I was walking past the clubhouse when Brandon's laugh carried through the open window. One of the other board members asked why he kept pushing changes without consulting me. Brandon snorted. This would have been done in half the time if Mom had let me run it from day one. Sarah's just overcomplicating everything. Legacy people always do. Legacy people. Like I was some dusty relic instead of the person who kept their fines flowing and their lawns green. I went home, opened the drawer, and pulled out the sealed envelope I'd kept for 6 months. My resignation from any illusion of goodwill. Because that one smug sentence was about to detonate everything he thought he controlled. The email landed Tuesday morning like a slap. Subject line, infrastructure transition, immediate action required. Body 1 line. Pull all vendor access and delete Sarah's administrative privileges. The portal is no longer under her management. It came from Vicky's official HOA account, which made it sting even more. No call, no meeting, Just corporate. Sorry. HOA. Eviction by keyboard. They didn't even have the guts to sign it themselves. Funny thing, I wasn't mad. Not anymore. I'd already made peace with how this neighborhood viewed people like me. The invisible fixer who kept the machine running until someone with a fancy title decided they could do it better. But peace doesn't mean surrender. I took exactly 4 minutes to reply. No emotion, just facts. Vicky and Brandon, I cannot fulfill that request. Per Clause 9b of the Custodial License Agreement, the environment remains under exclusive control of Community Guard Solutions through December 31st. Any transfer requires formal novation signed by all parties and reviewed by council. Attached for reference. Sent. Delivered. Read receipts lit up like fireworks. Legal opened it twice. Vicky opened it once. Brandon? Radio silence. Probably too busy playing king on the community Slack. I knew exactly what they wanted. Full back-end control, so they could gut the system, slap on a cheap new interface, and call it modernization at the next board meeting. Brandon needed a shiny feather for his cap. My system was the goose. But geese honk when cornered, and I'd wire my honk into every contract, every dashboard, every line of code. I sat back, opened the admin panel, and tagged the entire environment with a legal hold flag. Custodial dispute in progress. Subtle enough not to block anything yet, but it would log every single click Brandon made from now on. Because if he wanted to test how much control I really had, he was about to learn that real power doesn't live in clipboards or pastel cardigans. It lives in the fine print they never bothered to read. 10 minutes later, my inbox chimed with a blind copy of legal's reply to the entire board. Subject, immediate risk escalation. Body, you have just terminated the custodial vendor. One sentence. Enough to trigger the auto-release clause buried in Appendix C, line 212 of the Master Agreement. If the HOA demanded revocation or attempted unilateral shutdown, every active SLA voided instantly. No grace period. No mediation. Just a clean contractual snap, like a mousetrap the moment arrogance touched the cheese. Brandon hadn't just touched it. He'd licked the plate clean. I leaned back, clicked the control panel, and started the shutdown sequence. No drama. No warning banner. Just a soft cascade. Community portal disabled. Auto payment processing halted. Violation tracking paused. Security camera feeds encrypted and severed. Vendor payment nodes locked. The system didn't explode. It simply exhaled and closed its eyes. Then the backups kicked in. Every single file now watermarked in the top right corner. Proprietary asset, Community Guard Solutions. Custodial transfer required. Invisible to casual users until they tried to export anything. When they did, that watermark would glare back like a neon sign screaming, "You don't own this." I zipped the audit logs, time-stamped everything, and finally closed the environment entirely. One quiet line appeared on the internal status page. Access suspended. License custodianship terminated per MSA Clause 6.3a. I left the clubhouse an hour later without a word. Just my badge in my pocket and a USB drive I'd never need. Brandon had unplugged himself from the only thing keeping Willow Creek running. And the worst part? He still thought he'd won. Wednesday morning arrived with vengeance. The first panic text hit my phone at 6:17 a.m. Can't log into the portal, 503 error. Then the group chat exploded. Calendar invites for an urgent board update started flying. By 7:12, someone tried calling me directly. I let it ring. I wasn't their employee anymore. I was the vendor they just fired. Vendors don't troubleshoot for free. Brandon had scheduled a 9 a.m. presentation to show off his streamlined analytics flow. Someone forwarded the invite with 3 crying emojis. At 9:01, he clicked the link. At 9:02, every screen in the clubhouse filled with the same beautiful message, environment unavailable. License suspended. Please contact the custodial vendor. No duas reports. No violation logs. No security footage. Just blank tiles and error messages. The silence in that room must have been deafening. By Thursday, it got worse. Most residents still thought it was a glitch until Mrs. Henderson from 214 tried to pull last quarter's landscaping payment records and found nothing. It wasn't an outage. It was amnesia. All historical data sat encrypted under rotating keys that required a live license token. Brandon had cut that cord himself. Procurement couldn't pay the lawn crew. The pool chemicals vendor stopped deliveries. Security cameras went dark. No recordings. No alerts. Even the auto-find system froze. Which sounds like a win until you realize half the neighborhood started parking wherever they wanted, and the other half started reporting violations manually on paper like it was 1995. Chaos in cursive. Meanwhile, I sat on my porch with a glass of iced tea, watching Slack screenshots roll into my private email like panic carrier pigeons. One gem from a junior board member. Why does every exported report now say property of Community Guard Solutions in giant red letters? Someone replied, "Is that a bug? Are we being sued?" I didn't answer, but I chuckled. The watermark wasn't a threat. It was just the truth. Brandon had no idea how many layers he'd ripped away. People paid dues through the portal. Landscapers got paid through the portal. The security company checked feeds through the portal. Without it, the whole neighborhood was flying blind. And Vicky, sweet, rule-obsessed Vicky, was losing her mind trying to enforce lawn standards when the system that generated the citations was gone. Friday afternoon, 4 departments, for key committees, were in full panic. The finance chair couldn't see who owed what. Compliance couldn't issue new violations. Maintenance couldn't approve vendor work orders. Even legal was frantically digging through old paper contracts trying to figure out where it all went wrong. I was home watching true crime documentaries while the neighborhood imploded. And every time my phone buzzed with another screenshot, I felt that quiet, delicious satisfaction of watching someone who thought they were untouchable finally touch the third rail. By Monday, the spin machine was running at full speed. I got a forwarded message from someone still inside. Emergency board meeting, mandatory. Brandon had called every committee head, legal counsel, and a few influential residents for what he called a controlled update regarding system realignment. Realignment. Like the portal had wandered off on its own over the weekend. He strode into the glass-walled clubhouse like he owned the oxygen, smiling, caffeinated, wearing that tight tailored suit that screamed, "Mommy bought this." 8-slide PowerPoint, all stock photos and buzzwords. Opening line, "We're sunsetting legacy vendor dependencies to modernize neighborhood control." Someone from compliance raised a hand. "So why can't we see last month's violation reports?" Brandon's jaw twitched. The transition introduced temporary access limitations. We're resolving them. That's when legal mess. Patel, the only person with actual spine, cleared her throat. "Actually, we're not." Every head turned. She scrolled on her tablet and spoke like she was reading an obituary. "Brandon, you and President Langford issued a directive to revoke the custodial vendor's credentials and delete administrative access. That directive activated the auto-release clause in the master agreement, Section 6.3a, which voided all active SLAs, custodial rights, and support privileges effective immediately." Dead silence. She kept going. "More concerning, the environment contains embedded audit triggers. Every access attempt, override command, an attempted deletion since your email has been logged and routed to council, including the attempt to copy the proprietary schema." Brandon froze. The deer in headlights freeze. Color drained from his face. His clicker hand stopped midair. The slideshow stayed stuck on the slide titled Streamlined Future State. The board president, Vicky herself, finally spoke. Voice tight. Can we recover? Legal didn't blink. Not without full board reversal and the vendor's agreement. Then, like driving the final nail, she mirrored her screen. My final invoice appeared. Clean and merciless. Across the top in bold. Support suspended per section 12 MSA. At the bottom, environment closure triggered by client action. No further support guaranteed. Nobody spoke. They just stared at the line item totals, licensing fees, damage projections, additional charges for unauthorized access attempts, all calculated and contractually enforced. Brandon looked like he wanted to explain, but the only sound he managed was a strangle. This was supposed to be simple. The treasurer, who'd been quiet the whole time, leaned forward with the quiet tone of a man who hated wasting money. You mean to tell me you didn't know she owned the stack? Brandon didn't answer. He didn't have to. Now everyone knew exactly who had been in control and who had just lost it with one stupid email. By noon, the entire neighborhood was flying blind. Every portal, every report, every widget now read the same 5 words. Access suspended. Contact license holder. It hit the dues system hardest. Auto payments failed. Late fees couldn't generate. Residents started getting overdraft notices from their banks. Landscapers showed up, saw no payment in the system, and drove away. The pool closed because chemicals hadn't been ordered. Security cameras displayed offline signs that made people whisper about break-ins that hadn't even happened yet. And Vicky was out there in her golf cart with her clipboard, trying to handwrite violation notices like it was the pioneer days. While residents laughed in her face, Brandon stormed into legal's office like a toddler who dropped his ice cream. His voice carried down the hall. Get her back in. Revoke whatever clause. Fix it. Legal slid the folder across the table and tapped it once. You terminated the license holder. Clause 12.4a is triggered. We have no operational control until the board renegotiates custodial rights, which requires a vote, notarized revisions, and her approval, which, last I checked, we don't have. He stared like she was speaking alien. You're legal. Just override it. She closed the folder. There's nothing to override. It's not our system. The silence that followed was the kind you feel in your bones. Vicky tried to rally the troops with her usual for the good of the community speech, but even her loyalists were starting to look at her sideways. The system that enforced her precious rules was gone, and suddenly everyone remembered how many times she'd used it to target people she didn't like, including me. The rosebush fine from last spring, the mailbox shade complaint, all generated automatically by the very system she just killed. Poetic, really. I wasn't in the office, wasn't even in the state anymore. I'd driven up to a little Airbnb in the mountains the day after the shutdown, just to watch the fireworks from afar. My phone buzzed with the alerts I'd embedded months ago. 11:58 a.m., unauthorized multi-factor request failed. 11:59 a.m., emergency override attempted. 12 p.m., global lockout sequence completed. I took another sip of coffee and smiled. Control doesn't come from being in the room. It comes from knowing the door only opens when you say so. Legal tore through every archived contract like they were searching for a fire escape in a burning building. Paralegals printed, highlighted, cross-referenced. They dug up old emails, scanned inboxes, even tried handwritten margin notes from the previous board president who'd retired 3 years ago. Nothing. No loophole. Everything was sealed exactly as I'd left it. The clause had been buried under 4 appendices during the original platform migration, the one Vicky once called the most boring, successful launch we've ever had. That boredom had cost them the vigilance to reread the fine print before letting Brandon steamroll the system. Now they were paying for it in real time. The reinstatement process wasn't a simple email or a VP's backdated approval. It required a recorded board vote, notarized revisions to the MSA, and authentication by the license holder me. And I wasn't answering their calls. Vicky, once full of press release energy and all-hands declarations, had gone completely silent. Then, just like that, Brandon resigned. The announcement came via a one-line email from the HOA secretary. Effective immediately. Brandon Langford will be pursuing other opportunities. No farewell Zoom. No send-off cake. Not even a sad balloon in the clubhouse. He left like a shadow pulled off the wall. They appointed a new systems liaison, some poor guy from the compliance committee named Mike who thought he'd landed a promotion. First thing he tried, log into the core dashboard. Access denied. Then he tried to generate new credentials. Permissions failure. Then he found the PDF I'd left in the root directory like a digital tombstone. Governance transfer valid only with full signature set. 6 signature lines. Only 3 filled. The most critical one was mine, and I hadn't signed it. Mike sent a polite, hopeful email to my LLC's general inbox. He received the auto reply. This environment is protected under custodial suspension. Please consult your board representative for next steps. I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything online. Some victories don't need confetti. Some just need a well-placed PDF and the patience to let ego destroy itself. The board president, Vicky, didn't call right away. First came the assistant's email, then a second marked urgent. By the third, I gave her 20 minutes on a Friday afternoon. Not because I owed her anything, but because I wanted to hear what an apology sounded like when it wore pearls. She opened with pleasantries, commented on the weather, asked if I was still in Willow Creek. Then the tone shifted. We'd like to bring you back in as a partner, consultant, whatever role you prefer. Full retainer, direct board access. Her voice was calm, measured, practiced. I'll let the silence stretch just long enough to make her squirm. Then I said, the contract did its job. Vicky, it protected both sides until someone decided they didn't need protection. She didn't argue. She just exhaled like a woman who'd run out of moves. Would you at least consider returning on your own terms? I already had. My terms were boundaries. Instead of myself, I gave her the name of someone I trained. Elena. Smart. Disciplined. Knew the system cold, but didn't need to fight for recognition. She would be the new liaison. My LLC would retain custodial rights. No exceptions. All access would now require escrow-secured, rotating tokens. Time-gated, auto-expiring, tied to specific clauses in the renegotiated agreement. If anyone tried to override or extract data, the system would lock, notify legal, and self-isolate if necessary. No more Brandons. No more blind trust. Vicky didn't protest. She just said, understood. We'll work with Elena going forward. She didn't mention her son. Didn't need to. The board had already frozen all system initiatives indefinitely. Every roadmap item stamped, pending custodial approval. Brandon's modernization vision canceled. The new policy was simple. If you didn't build it, don't touch it. Weeks later, the silence turned into structure. Systems came back online, not with a bang, but with precision. Dashboards reloaded. Reports flowed. Processes reconnected like veins stitched back to a steady heart. But everything was different now. Every access point, every credential handshake, every audit trail regulated, recorded, bound by escrow logic. Before anyone could even enter their password, they were greeted by a new banner in clean Helvetica. Infrastructure and custodial rights held by Community Guard Solutions, LLC. Licensed through December 31st. No internal override permitted without board authorization. No confusion. No ambiguity. Just legal clarity projected on every screen. People stopped asking who built the system. They started asking how to work within it. Even Vicky, once buried in frantic searches, now operated with a kind of reverent caution. Every request passed through Elena. She didn't have my edge, but she didn't need it. The boundary was baked in. The board didn't even pretend they had override authority anymore. They understood. Permanence had teeth. At the annual Neighborhood Association conference a few months later, Vicky took the stage for her keynote. Polished, buttoned up, still pretending to be unshaken. She opened with a slide that read control versus custodianship, a modern lesson. Then she said, without naming names, sometimes the infrastructure you think you own is just something you're borrowing from someone much smarter than you. And if you're lucky, they built it well enough to protect you, even from yourself. The room laughed lightly. I watched the live stream from my new porch swing, coffee in one hand, pen in the other, jotting notes for a proposal I was drafting for another community. Someone who had already asked the right question from day one. What happens if we break trust? No smile crossed my face. Not from smugness. Not from bitterness. Just stillness. Like a mechanic who knows every bolt is finally tight. Because power doesn't shout. It waits until someone tries to take it. Then it reminds them, politely, that the door was never theirs to begin with. And somewhere in Willow Creek Estates, the lawns are green again. The pool is sparkling. The cameras are watching. And every single resident knows exactly who holds the keys. Not because I yelled. Not because I posted screenshots. But because one quiet woman refused to let entitled clipboards rewrite the rules she wrote in the first place. The end.